Okay. My voice finds you again, dear world. Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's episode. I wanted to speak about temporary vehicles and eternal trajectories, and what experience, how we as an experiential entity are journeying through manifestation. I'm going to speak on all this. Okay. Temporary vehicles and eternal trajectories. We can say if a giant, imagine a giant throwing a spaceship with its hand into the air. We would see a sort of temporary vehicle, and we would see a trajectory based on the speed, the power of the burst into space. You know, these talks are kind of trying to look at the world from where they can, and our eyes appear into the world. I feel we are physically born. That is the case. Physically we're born, but we awaken into our identities. And our identity, I mean, it's in the word. What are you identifying with? You know? And so it's very interesting, because if we have this notion that the child wakes up into a psychology, you know, that means it's like, if anybody right now listening to this, think about how you're an individual right now and how that happened. You'll notice it happened during childhood in an unconscious way, hence the conditioning that people have. So what does that mean? That means the child, I don't know, what is it they say, or when you wake up in the morning, it is the activation of individual consciousness. We are born into a world that has intelligence, but its intelligence is on different levels. Certain moments, the intelligence is inanimate, and in certain moments, the intelligence is animate. And it doesn't mean that intelligence is relevant to the object, even though we think that currently in our society. Intelligence will be seen as an identification with a field of being before the emergence of form. What does that mean? That means, imagine you're a young kid, the child loves its parents, the parents love the child. The child has to coexist in an environment, and whether people like it or not, even though people are family members, on some level we're all experiencing creaturehood. So I'm suggesting that this creature speaks an emotional language. The first duality that the child actually is aware of is not a physical, it's not an image, it's an emotion. And it's the suggestion that there was mind before matter moved. Because we are saying that matter is moving based on a mind. That's why in society, if somebody loses their mind, people freak out. Somebody finds their mind, people smile, you know. I remember one of the best ways I've heard, just, you know, through language, how we can approach the mind is trying to find its presence. Now, the presence of your body, it's very immediate. I mean, if somebody told you, find your body right now, your body, you're being it, it's right there, it's instantaneous. But if somebody told you, find your mind, or like I could tell you, touch your shoulder. Like you can touch your physical shoulder, but if I tell you, touch your mind, you'll notice something interesting, that the mind is the one touching. So saying touch your mind is like saying with your index finger, with that same index finger, touch that in the same tip of that index finger. It's like the tip of the finger touching the tip of the same finger. It is an impossibility. Or Alan Watts says it in the sense that trying to bite your own teeth. After some point in any sort of system, there is fluctuation. That means you're looking at life. Life is neither meant to be just happy 24/7, and it's neither meant to be sad and meaningless 24/7. It's more like a liquid state of existence. What does that mean? That means poetically think that, for example, a substance such as H2O, it goes into, based on how the particles are in the temperature, based on the speed the particles are moving in the temperature, at the temperature, the nature of the substance changes. What does that mean? That means when the particles are moving slower, it's more solid. When the particles move faster, there is generation, there is evaporation. So think of it this way, that the solid state is materialism. This, imagine water, you look at ice in the freezer, that ice is materialism. That now imagine steam when you're like, pouring tea for yourself, that steam of the tea you see, that steam, think of it as it is immaterialism. It is mind, pure mind. And so we are a liquid intelligence, hence all this wisdom that is just saying balance, kids, balance. Like, everything is going towards a sort of balance. This life is not per se, it's not important just you having a surfboard. It's how you surf the waves of life, how your attention navigates into the moment as a phenomenon. So if we are in a liquid state of mind, just let's consider that idea for a second. That implies that we are seeing both worlds, and that's the situation. The reason there's a lot of wars, the reason why there's so much messed up stuff happening, is because we are actually multidimensional beings. We are like in experiencing two dimensions, but we think it's one dimension. And that's where suffering begins, when you don't see the complexity before the first simplicity you considered. When you see that complexity before the first simplicity, then you realize there's a simplicity to the greater complexity. That means the more complex God, the idea of God becomes, the more simple the human being seems. The more complex the idea of the human being becomes, the more simple the idea of God becomes. So Kimberly, welcome to the chat section. Kimberly seems to like the liquid intelligence idea. Yeah, this liquid state, it's the fluid mind. Now, there's various ways that we can approach it, but just to ground in the metaphor, why would a human being on this planet speak about temporary vehicles with eternal trajectories? That means what in nature what in nature appears as a temporary vehicle with an eternal destination. Imagine you had a transcendental car, and this transcendental car, you put in the GPS destination, and the GPS location was beyond time. It was an eternal trajectory, eternal destination. An endless journey. So it would be as if this car it knows where it's heading, it hasn't gotten there, and it can have impressions on it before. An example of a temporary vehicle with an eternal trajectory is the DNA. And if you were Buddhist, it would be the conscious being. Because consciousness is something very hard to personalize. This may be an odd concept, but from the beginning of my life, I assumed comfort with my own mind. I assumed I knew myself. And I honestly feel true intelligence requires a confrontation with the unknown to realign or to acknowledge the new. So we have a question from Kimberly in the chat section. She says, what in nature has been removed from being a vehicle of understanding? What in nature has been removed from being a vehicle of understanding? Well, first of all, if you say something is removed from nature, you're acknowledging the universe from outside of it. So that means you're considering a will to the universe from outside of nature moving itself. I would say what in nature has been removed from being a vehicle of understanding? The past. My answer would be the past. If this was a game show, Kimberly, I would say the past. The answer is the past. The past is what automatically removes. It comes and goes. Literally, my relationship with my past is really simultaneously being my relationship with the present moment. That's the thing. That's when I realized that on some level, whether you're remembering the past or visualizing the future, it's happening in the same space of phenomena generation. That means the attention is projecting. You see, the ego only needs to die if it was born. I have this relationship where I have a detachment from language, so I don't identify with language even though I use it. I see language as a technology. You don't live in your car, you use the car, you know. And the strategy of this whole life is it gives you it's like Texas Hold'em. It gives you hands, it gives you cards, it gives you options, and the only thing you have is this effort arising from it within and this observance before the action. This is really all of human life. If I could tell you what is human life, it's either you're moving before observing or you're observing before moving. I notice that when we observe before we move, we are aware as a field, then particles move in it, so you retain consciousness. So, welcome to the chat section, Clinical Sword. The thing is, guys, I mean, it's like life is like a candle. I'm not joking. I feel like a candle sometimes. And people are going to be like, what do you mean, Mr. Within? How can you feel like a candle? You're a human being, goddammit. You're a human being. I'll tell you, I feel like a candle. every time I'm conscious. I feel consciousness is not just a reception. I feel what is happening as the mind is not just the body. The body appears as part of the moment, but it appears as the part where the moment's attention arises from. So the brain is like the wick of the candle, you know? And literally, what can a candle do? I mean, think about it. The candle either it just illuminates its inner realm, or in this lifetime, you can attempt to move beyond your inner realms. Because I've often wondered. I remember something I recommend everybody to do who their grandparents are with them still. Go and interview your grandparents. Go and record their voices and their stories. And they'll also feel like their legacy exists. I remember interviewing my 80-year-old grandfather, and he was a man who he started from kind of like he started working at the age of 12, and by the age of 20 was like a by the age of 30 was like a factory owner pioneering like the Iranian leather industry, giving momentum to it and whatnot. And of course, he was a religious man. That was the linguistic interface that his personality projected through. And I remember, and I asked him, and I'm like, what was this element in your success? Like, how did you perceive success? I asked that from my grandfather. And guys, he had reached like a legitimate level of success from his starting point. And he told me something very, of course, he was old and he's a religious man, and he told me, just open a store and God will send customers. So imagine 80 interviewing your 80-year-old, successful businessman grandfather, and realizing that his whole business strategy was to trust the step forward. And there was something very profound there, because it is as if, like, if you don't give something from yourself, nothing happens to the self. That means, I'll tell you guys, there's some people who are sad, for example, when they have karma, a certain strange karma. But there are some people who also get sad when they don't have karma. So I'm saying you can feel it's weird when you have karma, and you can also feel it's strange when you don't have karma. I think ultimately there's no such thing as karma. Karma is like we're moving inside a swimming pool. Every movement gives a sort of wave and expression on the surface. So, guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Kimberly says, Kimberly says, like the flame in reaction to the environment you surrounded with. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, on some level, when let's say you're doing something. Imagine you're building a house of cards, and then your little cousin comes and breaks it. Okay, imagine you're building a house of cards, and your little cousin comes and breaks it. It's like at that point, you even see your little cousin had no idea. Let's say your young cousin had no idea that what it was. It was just an object your cousin could hit. You know, so you after some point can't blame psychology for what is happening that is beyond the psychology. I would say I am a human being as long as there's a condition. Like when there's a body, when there's a literally there, it's like a bridge in front of your eyes. You're an object. Phenomenology appears objective, and their space is the void. But behind your eyes, phenomenology appears subjective, evocationally, and there is also the void. So the only way for a human being to experientially, Mr. Within finds, to experientially move beyond the sensory perception is to not do anything. Believe it or not, like Lao Tzu says, action through inaction. Meditation is no longer do this and get a sticker, you know, get a sticker of enlightenment. No, meditation is not a certification. You know, I am not. I don't feel any. When education is a toolbox. When people realize knowledge is a toolbox, knowledge is relevant based on what you want to do with it, how you want to move as a being. So, Clinical Sword says, "How's your evening going so far?" Well, it's 11:18 p.m. here, but it's going great. Yeah. Guys, for me, my whole life, literally the past is past. You can't do anything about the past, it's gone. And the present is being momentarily experienced, and the future is the potential. So when I wonder about my future, have you noticed, like, I'll give you an example. Like, if I remember correctly, was it Marcus Aurelius? Oh no, it was Was it Alexander the Great? Guys, just hang on for a second. I'm gonna double check something. Okay, there we go. So this is something that recently has come to my attention, that Alexander the Great, there's something called the Opus Mutiny, and there's this situation. Alexander the Great was this great conqueror, this next level conqueror, and then there's this point where some of his men doubt him. So that means mutiny means when you go against the authority, when you go against the authorization of what is valid. That means in this world, for example, if you go speak to a community of religious people, you see certain topics are unauthorized. Like you can't speak too metaphysically with a person who feels that the soul is a secret of the creator, for example. You know, so it's like the environment has its own language, and the mind is walking through rooms of different language. You know, this opus mutiny, this idea from Alexander the Great, was that pretty much Alexander the Great, his soldiers or something are like not listening to him, not agreeing with his kind of vision. And then Alexander the Great gives this next level badass speech where he says, like, my father, look at what he did. He took you from random villagers and made you into important men, into noblemen. Like literally, Alexander the Great was restoring the strength of his army by reminding them how far they had come. You know, so that's the thing. It's like that. This is life. It's like, I'll give you an example. Imagine in Persian culture, I see this a lot, but in Western culture, I don't see it that often. Let me tell you what it is. It is social restoration of outer image. What does that mean? That means, imagine, uh, okay, imagine an environment where when you make a mistake, that mistake gets highlighted. Now imagine an environment when you make a mistake, that mistake is not ignored, is acknowledged, but then the environment makes your attention go on what's after. That means there was a point where I was like, what is the purpose of life? And I realized as long as I could ask the question, there could be an answer. Like how intense is that? It's like the purpose of life is while you're alive, you're in position. you're in movement, you know? I remember it's like the human being is hilarious, you know? We feel that nature, we are in nature. We don't feel we are nature. And I feel when the species feels natural to itself, the greatest dance of the inner realms of humanity will occur. That means we have found certain tactics and strategies. Uh, Sorry, guys, I'm going on too many tangents, I think. If we have an ability to acknowledge the temporary, and if we have an ability to acknowledge the temporal, then that acknowledgement is a value beyond both worlds. That substance metaphor I was using earlier in regards to liquid state, solid state, gas state, liquid state, how the gas state is like a metaphysical viewpoint, how the solid state is like a physical viewpoint, and the liquid state is a dynamic mixture of the two. So, what does that mean? That means our minds are semi-known, semi-unknown. We cannot, we cannot say truth is absolute, because if it is, we wouldn't exist. That means if truth exists, we don't. If we exist, the truth that doesn't exist outside of the question. Guys, I'm gonna share something. I tend to speak by first perceiving an image and then giving it words. I would say if you're gonna ask me a question in the chat section, ask in a way where I can perceive the image. Ask as if you are seeing the image of your question before you give it words. And those questions I would love to answer. So, anyways, back to this idea that we're using this analogy of body, mind, uh, unknown soul, so known body, semi-known mind, semi-unknown mind, and then unknown soul. Really, what it means is we are multidimensional, and we're multidimensional and singular at the same time. It's like the left brain hemisphere has to endlessly construct, and the right brain hemisphere has to endlessly destroy. Playfully, poetically, I'm saying this like it's as if there's this urge of endlessly continuing, and there's this urge when we see we can't continue to stop continuing. The thing is, we gotta transition the psychology of the creature into one that instead of the creature has an inner realm and an outer realm, the creature has noticed the inseparability of the both as the ultimatum of where ability originates. So we have currently, sorry guys, I'm speaking outside to get some fresh air. It's also late here, so I can't speak too loud. Hopefully, silence will assist. What can I say? It's moving. It becomes an unknown mystery. After you have believed it to be this known phenomenology your whole life, you start seeing deeper dimensions to life, and your life is never the same life as it used to be in an entropic universe where everything changes and we grow. So really, it's like we have to think more than a thought and more than the thought of the human. And I feel we're reaching one of the most daunting and incredible challenges of philosophy ever known to man. The individualization, or let me say it like the inseparability of the individual consciousness with its environment. We are like that creature, that species in nature that stepped out of nature, and we were no longer the ecosystem was defining us. We started to define the ecosystem. Then we lived in our own definition of the ecosystem to feel this disconnection with nature, only now going towards an evolutionary return to nature. That means it's like I sometimes look at, for example, many esoterically minded, spiritually minded, even religious minded people, and a part of me kind of, there, I don't say there's anger, but there's this frustration that I see the archaic doesn't see the modern, and the modern doesn't see the archaic, and I was wondering why for eons is this endless cycle going? Why is this endless countercultural kind of loop of there being nothing, something, duality, the infinite, and then back into the void? You know, I was like, it's like, what happens after infinity dies? Nothing. Exactly. It becomes nothing. Infinity's experience of the new is discontinuity. So I feel it's not that we're in a karmic cycle, it's just that we are some sort of attention, and this attention has two center of gravity. So imagine that right now, I mean, Einstein came and changed the idea a little bit with space-time, but I'm going to say, let's take a more classical kind of physics approach to this and think that the gravity, the Earth is pulling everything towards it. Okay, so now I want you to imagine like that constant of gravity. Pretty much, the bigger the object is, the more the gravitational pull. Okay, so it's kind of wondering, all right, so the attention has emerged on a planet where the planet has a gravitational pull, and this is why for example, space debris and all this comes towards falling down towards the atmosphere. But check this out. If there is one Earth, and so if you see one planet, okay, let's see, well, I'm on Earth right now. It's such a common idea to acknowledge the center of gravity. This Earth has center of gravity. Now, if there were two Earths in two dimensions, but there was a self that was experiencing two worlds. Behind our eyes were the spectrum, the experience of the whole spectrum. In front of our eyes, we are a point in it. Let me tell you what mysticism is, which comes down to the full resolution of the temporary and eternal. Mysticism is at night looking at a dark forest with a lantern in your hand. That is all that we know. I mean, there is language, there's a lot of things in this world that we're considering to be in our domain of knowledge and accessibility and use. But I'm saying, on some strange level, every living being is being a lantern held in the middle of an invisible darkness. Guys, I'm just saying, we're painting our faces and we're painting our minds with language, and we still need to evolve experientially, and we need to do it on a massive level. And how do we do this? You know, if somebody says, Mr. Within, what was this life like? I'll be like, I pretty much opened my eyes and I was like, what do we do with this? And then I closed my eyes, and that's it. That is life. It is a wonder. We are existential creatures. Do you know how incredible that is? Do you know, I can't believe the concept of stress and depression exists. You know, Napoleon Bonaparte was known to shout that impossible was a word in a fool's dictionary. Conquerors realized existence is now, as if on some level, I'm not trying to suggest hedonism, but on some level, now is the only stage you have always been on. There's many moments of my life. Some moments of it are communicatable. For example, this moment. But some moments I don't even touch language. I don't even use it. I'm not a creature of language. I'm just more like a roaming attention that has found comfort with its attribute as attention. That's it. That's it. I have just noticed that there's something present before my personality was here, and that's what we are. We have been welcomed to an opportunity. Existence is an opportunity. The purpose of life is literally what you do with an opportunity. In life, you spend time in your inner realms, moving as a mind, and you can spend time in your outer realms moving as a body. The human being can reach a sophistication where it's designed to witness its own perception. What does that mean? That means as I'm speaking right now, I'm also hearing myself. So there's a simultaneity to an intelligent acknowledgement of expression and reception at the same time, same moment. Honk, I would say words are not traps, they're just not the whole world. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, this German philosopher says, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And we have Hafiz 700 years ago, this Persian Sufi, saying, the words you speak become the house you live in. That means, dear listeners, it is now time to move into an era of advanced communication. Don't evoke vocally what you don't want to see to have an effect. Because you can't do anything in a system that is moving based on laws that we can't interpret. So the universe is too big. It's like literally, if there is, like, it's like a coin flip. If there is a chance that this world is one complete organism, that means people are like, what do I do with my karma? But it's like the fact that the concept exists for you is your karma. Let me tell you why. Because it's as if, like, sometimes I've looked at nature and I was like, what is this? It's showing patterns of the biological body. What does that mean? That means when, for example, you get cut, or something like you get a paper cut, the cells in the body immediately assisted and attended. And if you don't clean the wound, there's infection. Okay, so the cells of the body sends white blood cells. It calls the nightclub bouncers to get rid of the infection, to kick the infection out of the club. The white blood cells, in some sense, declare war on the unknown, on the intruding infection into the biological system. So what does that mean? That means inside your body, if a red blood cell became conscious and had a personality, imagine they built the cells in your veins, the red blood cells in your veins built a civilization. They started building their own sciences. They had their history, mathematics, technologies, but they would still have no idea why the person would go to work. So the issue is that if the world is hierarchical, which seems to be highly likely, if the world is multidimensional, then action is purpose. If the world is singular, space is the purpose. If the world is void, the purpose never existed. The purpose of purpose doesn't exist. And if the world is infinite, it is endless multidimensional simulations. That means I was looking at nature and I'm like, nature, what are you doing? And nature, in some sense, was simulating life. Right now, I feel like a simulation. I'm not saying life is a dream, but it kinda is when we can't see the beginning of history and we can't see its end. And I'm thinking those red blood cells in the vein, in the vein of the human being, if they built language, and their language couldn't assist them, and I was thinking, what if right now we are inside the body of a much more higher dimensional organism? What if we are the red blood cells of God? Do you know? Or instead of the word God, what if the universe is alive? That's it. Let's not even give it personality. Let's just say it's alive. Because morality only applies to conscious life. If when you're unconscious, it doesn't matter how much right or wrong they tell you. You're like a berserk animal. You know, animal that's gone berserk. So then at that point, there's no consciousness aside from you handling your inner realms. This is why when I see people get upset, I know that they don't know the difference between their inner realms and outer realms. when I see that there's this concept, for example, cyberbullying, you know, I was like, damn, the world's become soft. Our ancestors used to run into battlefield with metal objects and try to defend their kingdoms, but now it's like, you know, the wrong word goes into a fragile ear and it breaks the identity of the person, you know, and we have to realize that we are much stronger than our ability to even perceive our weakness. So check this out. If right now we are cells in the universal organism, inside a universal organism, karma is the whole body's approach. Karma is the whole body's approach. Guys, I think I figured it out. We have been given the blueprint of an advanced civilization right in front of our eyes. After some point, it's either one phenomena or it's a fragmented phenomenology, or if it is void, then in some sense phenomenology could be beyond the dimension of speech. That means, like, literally I feel human beings are experiencing things that are, let's playfully give this metaphor, that are three-dimensional, but our language is two-dimensional. And this is why poetry is trying to capture uh, the eyes of the soul of the author, of the poet. Okay, so guys, Honk in the chat section says an incredible quote from Alfred North Whitehead, which I think it is the best time you could have shared this quote. Honk says, so Alfred North Whitehead has this quote. He says, "Beware of the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, mistaking an abstraction for concrete reality for actuality." Little did Alfred North Whitehead know that the idea of the self is an abstraction that you have to see concrete or you have no starting point. You see, if you fear something, you want to run to extreme solutions. When you don't fear something, you look at it from different dimensions of intensity, and this is life. Think as if, ask yourself why in life is there inefficiency and efficiency? Why is it that there's some people, and I asked this in my youth, I asked this, and it was pretty much like a lifetime's journey for me to kind of figure this out. But what it is that I would wonder what is making some human beings their attention more significant than the attention of other human beings. I remember when I saw the video of Martin Luther King giving a speech, then literally in the YouTube recommended section there was like a John F. Kennedy speech after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was listening to these two human beings. They were so enlightened. They were seeing the future while people were still trying to bite the past. And what fascinated me, even in Gandhi's life, Gandhi, I'm going to tell you a story actually about it. Gandhi was sitting in a room and somebody comes and knocks and Gandhi's meditating. And the person comes to Gandhi and he's like, "Gandhi, what do we do? Everybody's waiting." Gandhi's like, "The answer hasn't come to me. Don't disturb me." The guy goes. Then, after a while, the guy comes back and says, "Gandhi, people are waiting. What do we do?" And Gandhi says, "The answer hasn't come to me, you know." And then the guy leaves. Then Gandhi's just sitting silently in a room, closed, his eyes are closed. And then the guy knocks again and says, "Gandhi, what do we do?" And Gandhi just silently stands up as if the vision landed, and then he acted, which was the purpose of the life. And Gandhi just starts walking in the street, and there's a film of this, you can go see it. And the story is, at the time, there was British colonization, and that means in India, people in the salt and the beach of the in India was illegal for Indians to get, so they couldn't get access to the salt of their own beaches because of colonialism. And so, what does that mean? That means Gandhi he gets this vision, and he just starts walking, and he walks out, and silently, it's a silent march. It's the most beautiful collective movement I've seen, where Gandhi was like, wow. Gandhi just silently walks, and as he walks, the people in the town, even Sri Prabhupada, who started the Hare Krishna movement, he was a young kid at that time. And so they go. Gandhi is walking, and Gandhi just walks to the beach with an army of people just waiting to see what Gandhi does. And Gandhi grabs the salt from the beach, and it's non-violent resistance, a non-violent revolution, where it's not. Sorry, guys, I'm getting a bit emotional. Excuse me. So, anyways, in that moment, guys, when Gandhi picks up the salt, everybody starts picking up the salt. And when you live for what is your right, when you live for the right of your humanhood, uh, nature acknowledges it. When you're honest, at least I could tell you, nature sees it. That means if civilization was built on a giant turtle's back, when a human being is honest in that civilization, the turtle's like, good job, buddy. Can you imagine? Because honesty is simplicity. What does that mean? That means in the child's experience, there is an unconditional, non-referential realness to phenomenology. So, what does that mean? That means we are experiencing our life in snapshots and also as a film. When it's a film, it's too dynamic. When it is in snapshots, we can touch it and sculpt it in whatever way we like. You know, that's the thing about language. That means uh, the superior languages, we need AI to create them. You know, some people are scared of the year 2050 because they feel that we're going to create technologies that's going to update itself faster than we can control it, so we're not going to be the most smartest phenomena on this planet. So I was thinking, what would you ask? Or even in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they ask that giant computer that question, and it says 42, the meaning of life or something. I would ask that super intelligent computer to come up with a geometrical language, a perfect geometrical language. That means, I don't know why we haven't attempted this, but we should create a language. I mean, somebody said it was called Esperanto or something. Esperanto. This language, that's evidently universal. Honestly, it's just acknowledgement of form. It's how you're a character in a story, how comfortable you are being a character, and how comfortable you are with the story. In this life, when the world becomes uncomfortable, the self has to compensate. When the self becomes comfortable, the self expects the world to compensate, but strangely, civilization hasn't reached that point yet. Right now, we have to realize that we are not living in an advanced civilization in front of our eyes, but behind it, we can start to. So, Honk probably is shouting this because this is capitalized, but he says, "What if the, what if the center starting point is just our experience as the viewer?" I want to. You see, look at your statement. You say, "Is just our experience as the viewer." That means there is no viewer. There's just experience happening. We embody it. And I don't think we embody. I think we are kinda, I feel manifestation is a glove for an eternal being. Literally, it's as if eternal hands are are steering, are puppeteering elemental forces. Okay? Now, this doesn't mean agency, because that was the whole thing. You know, it's hilarious. Back in the day, if me and you, if I was like, if we were all like all the people listening here, imagine we were alive in ancient Greece. It's like if we didn't believe there were gods walking on the clouds, if we didn't believe that, we'd be the fools. So you gotta totally understand. Sorry guys, I got distracted for a second. I can't tell if my voice is too loud and if it's disturbing the neighbor, but I don't think so. I think the neighbor's already disturbed. I'm joking, I'm joking. Clinical sword, I was joking, man. Anybody who uses caps in the chat section, get out of this talk. I'm joking. Oh man, that's silly. I mean, the analysis is this, is like every moment I'm kind of looking at it. Sometimes I feel I'm just giving a commentary on what I'm experiencing in the moment, often in these talks. Um, and what is the moment? Like, when the eyes are open, visual reality is accessible. When you just close your eyes, visual reality is inaccessible. But does that mean there's no inner visual reality? There is an inner. It's like the mind holds inner cinematics, you know. Guys, I can speak louder. It's just, is it worth it? That's the question.
Alright, I feel there's more to this. I feel that it's a phase. I think the fact that we think we're temporary creatures and that evolution seems to be this strange eternal urge to keep continuing, and the genetics are, what is the DNA doing? Trying to be immortal through reproduction, like, you see? So there's something strange in regards to creaturehood. So we gotta acknowledge it as if just by being a creature we're in a certain biological program, and then by also being a creature in an ecosystem we are also influenced by epigenetics and anything that is beyond the body, right? So the mind is kind of like how you're being the world for your body. The awareness is like the world of the self, the context for the conceptual self. Guys, but I recommend not using headphones in case if I cough or something. You know? All right, here's the thing. We acknowledge the body. Okay, let's go. Somebody brought up the Gita earlier. Let's use that analogy. Let's say 8 billion people. We all accepted. All right, our intelligence is like a chariot, which is a metaphor in the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita says the physical reality, the body, the solid state, solid manifest state. It's like the horses. Okay, the senses are like the horses, and the chariot driver is the mind, and what's inside the chariot is the unknown soul. Now check this out. The chariot driver, it's as if it has an amnesia. This amnesia, as if the soul has already given commands to the mind before birth, and as the person is born, like the chariot driver is on the road, finds itself conscious on the road, but the chariot driver doesn't has forgotten the soul, has forgotten that there is more than just the body and the mind. Okay, so the chariot driver is the conscious mind, and Carl Jung was like, in this life you gotta make what's unconscious conscious, or it will influence you. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate, as Carl Jung says. So what does that mean? That means in the person, your conscious mind, it is responsible not to for the horses, but for also the person in the chariot. So your very rational, linear survival intelligence is responsible for conducting your senses to get your soul to a destination. So the psychology, the ego, is the chariot driver, the temporary chariot driver, where the soul's like, yo man, get me to this destination, you know? And so when the chariot driver falls asleep, when the chariot driver falls asleep, the soul comes and it's like, yo man, wake up, what is this, you know? And then the chariot driver immediately wakes up. So there's moments I personally have experienced, guys. It's very rare. I've maybe experienced it 3 times in this lifetime, where I have reached, I have went some synchronistic or intuitive something happened in a strange way, that I got destroyed to myself behind my eyes. And it was a sort of inner, not death, inner apocalypse. And at the edge of that inner apocalypse, it is the full letting go of the archetype, and the archetype comes into the judgment of the will. So there is a part of your mind acting like God for every concept you have ever seen. So it's kind of like the concept of a sort of mystical angle, where even Meister Eckhart was saying the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. That means the simultaneity of collective eyes, again, the same thing that the cells in the body realize the whole body is conducting them. I feel that we are, if we are a complete organism, if right now all of nature is one alive, living body, the universe is alive. I'll get back to the chariot metaphor, but just if the universe is alive, that is an incredible advantage because it means we can communicate with anywhere of the body. We are being part of a greater communication. The universe, that's one thing that we never thought about it. That what if it was communicated into existence? What if it was put forth? So the relationship of the modern time is a relationship with the chariot driver. I personally feel that there is this also view of enlightenment being as if the chariot driver, the soul in the chariot got bored being in the chariot and came to sit beside the mind. My physical, my manifest, my objective realm is like a temporary vehicle. I treat it like that. This body, I treat it as if, honestly, like a vehicle because I'm not in it 24/7. When I'm in deep sleep, I'm not in conscious as the physical body. In the dream states, I'm not conscious as the physical body. In deep sleep, there is no consciousness of the physical body. There's no consciousness of world either. The dream state is the most mysterious state of consciousness. There's a huge chance that everybody's enlightened when they're sleeping. Because it is Advaita at its purest. What is the most non-dual state? Deep sleep. And here's the thing, Alan Watts had this quote, if I can remember it, I mean, probably people in the chat section can help me. He had this quote that was, it's like going to sleep and wondering what it's like to never wake up, and it's like waking up realizing as if you were never asleep, something like that. Alan Watts says this. That is one of the most incredible statements I've ever heard, which implies that it's as if you are awake before you were asleep. You see, you have to allow yourself, as Gandhi would say, to be the change in the world you want to see. Clinical sword, I have no idea what your comment means. No, I just don't know what you mean. Hall of honey? Guys, I'm going to tell you one of the most mystical jokes you're going to hear in your life. Okay? There's a man. He's smoking something. And of course, guys, this is a joke, so have discretion listening to this. There's this man on top of this, I don't know, it's a 7-story building, and he's having a late night smoke,
and suddenly somebody from outside on the street comes up, and the guy's at the edge of the building just staring, and the guy comes and shouts and he says, "Bob, your wife and kids have passed away. You know, they're gone, man, they're gone." The guy cries and the guy runs afterwards. This man suddenly just puts his hand over his eyes and he's like, "My family is gone. I have nothing to live for." And he lets go of the cigarette and he lets go of himself. And as he's falling down the building, he's thinking about his life. And as he's falling, you know, he goes down 2 floors, you know, 1/3 of the way he's down. And he's like, "When did I have kids?" It's like, did I have kids? As he's falling down, you know, 2/3 of the way, he's like, "Wait a minute. When did I get married?" Right before the guy falls on the ground, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm not even Bob." And that's the end of the joke, guys. And just to make the joke discreet, he wakes up. It was all a dream. You know, it was all a dream. That was the interesting thing. That guy's intelligence, attention, entertained the realism of the information. I feel this is the thing. When you're young, you get pushed around by information, and then the resolution when you're young is to push information, the expressive urge of the individual. But after the person goes through various cycles of experience and existential activity, you after a while can't ignore what you are. And so what it is I think most people have concluded their own being as a feeling of the whole moment. So really, we have to wonder, what other picture can we paint that will allow the language to stretch? And I think there's 2 options. Either we completely have this global universal movement of language engineering and reestablishment. We start creating new languages, or we expand the current languages we have. We just start creating alphabets, and let's say numeral alphabets, or even geometrical shapes. That means it's not just the letters of the alphabet from A to Z, then there's also numeral alphabets, geometrical shapes again, and language it advances forward. It's kind of like at night, my mind moves more than my body. In the day, my body moves more than my mind. Oh, and Javi, thanks for making it clear. I think now I know what you mean. That's a good idea. I don't know though if it's a good idea. I'm trying this thing to stay away from sugar. Life can be sweet in many ways. You can like the taste of sour food, for example, like a strawberry or a cherry, and it's like, if that's like that sour, it's like the sour is your sweetness. You know, that's the fascinating thing. It's like inevitably every mind has to attempt the mystery on their own. And when they attempt, they get to see new dimensions of their own intelligence. So the thing in this life is, let's divide it into 3 states. 1/3 of life you're sleeping, so technically that part is done. 1/3 of your life you're sleeping.
1/3 of it you're just moving around and navigating. So if you keep your physical existence healthy, like that's 2/3 of the lifetime done. Then there's 1/3 remaining, where it was like after the person, it's like the person, you know, wondering, why did I have a body anyways? Why did I have a mind? Sorry, why did I have a mind anyways? Yeah, it was a story my uncle told me. You know, it was a joke my uncle told me, but he didn't even say the dream part of that. I added that to make it discreet. You know, I'm honestly really feel that the species is catching on to uh, a sense that right now there's something else other than the object and the subject that we've been defining ourselves through. We've been tunneling through language. Ridiculous. So I kind of feel like if you don't have expectations for your own mind, if you don't have expectations from life, you just watch it. Life surprises you 24/7. That means you might not realize anytime, here's the thing, when I, for example, in moments of my life where I've gotten bored, I study the boredom. I'm like, why am I bored? And I realize it's because I'm standing behind an obstacle. So, what is the solution? What is the solution to any moment of manifestation? Either the self, it becomes simpler than the world, or the self becomes complex. If your self becomes quicker, more complex than the world, you're going to get bored. But if the world becomes more complex than the self, you're going to become excited. So any person who's bored, just do something humble and you'll suddenly find your excitement. I think the proper balance is we are using our knowledge as a surfboard on unknown waves. We are honestly like the void moving. We are the mover, and we are space. We're not being in space. We are space. So the same way we can say we arose from the earth, what if there was an invisible evolution? That means what if we were evolving in ways that we could never see? So how much would that suggest of the unknown ability that every human being holds? So anyways, guys, I feel I'm going to end the talk here. Unless people want me to elaborate something. But, oh yeah, I forgot. The chariot. The mind will become after some point synonymous with awareness and space. So you, after some point, don't need to, it's like as long as you just see consciousness, the unconscious is forever the unknown. It is only your approach to how you're conscious that can shift your actual experience of the unknown. You know, guys, I'll tell you something about Alfred North Whitehead. I'll tell you something. I'll in the chat section. It says, only trust the simplicity that lies on the other side of complexity. That's, he's pretty much saying the future tells all. I think that's what that Alfred Whitehead quote means. But Alfred Whitehead has had such an incredible approach because he was that guy who really redlined the engines of secular society towards a neo-metaphysical approach, I guess, where it's rather than seeing us as these complex collection of particles in space, he saw it as all a process. So the soul is a process, is how the whole moment is being a process that is inseparable from the individual and the cosmic activity. So Alfred Whitehead didn't say it like that, but he was just saying it's a process, therefore it's dynamic. Okay? That means you can't teach horse riding. You can't teach skydiving. You can talk about it before the experience. You can try to project the experience, but you can't do it until you do it. It's like that feeling of writing your first book. It's like there's no feeling like it. So, anyways, guys, there's gonna be Q&A. I'm gonna open it up to Q&A right now. Thanks for whoever's listened so far. Feel free to ask any question. We're kind of all like, philosophers in the School of Athens 2.0, wondering about, all right, what next? So, yeah. So the Q&A, let's make it 20 minutes Q&A. And anybody has a question, write it, and I'll enter cyberspace. Blessings. Okay, guys, so Sandro in the chat section says, question, am I God? Capitalized God. So how do you define God? If you tell me how you define God, then I can give you an answer. Is God an experience for you? Is God a concept for you? Is God in paint, artwork in an art gallery for you? So what do you mean by God? Do you mean a non-dual experiencer? So Honk says, I've been thinking of the quantum mind as the balancer of good, evil, light, dark, micro, macro, unity, duality. Question mark, question mark. When you say quantum mind, do you mean a mind that is simultaneously present in two realities at once or multiple realities at once? What do you mean by a quantum mind, Honk? And Sandro, I don't know how you're defining the word God, but I would say this one statement where I've said in other talks, your attention is the God of your thought. So if you are the attention to thought, you appear to yourself as the supreme will of your conceptual neurons.
But there is more. Like I'm telling you, we are drops that are in an ocean. We're icebergs melting in an ocean. This human life is like the iceberg part of it. Sandro says God is all, the quantum computer who runs all. Okay, so if God is all, then it can't be a quantum computer who runs all. It should be the quantum computer who runs all plus all that is, right? So it can't be. It can't have shape because it's all shapes. A drop of ocean water, uh, like a raindrop. So Sandro, hold on a second. Let me just answer Honk first, and I'll give you an answer. So Honk says a drop of water is not the ocean. Let me tell you the way I see how they are. I see in a vertical dimension, we're an individual conscious object. We're like a raindrop falling from the heavens. We don't know our past. We don't know our future. We're like, why God? What is this? What's the meaning of this individual life? You know? And then as this raindrop falls, little does it know, it's going to intersect with a horizontal dimension where the raindrop in the ocean is the whole ocean. So right now, we are experiencing an individual momentum towards a collective state. I think it's a field. I honestly feel that if free will is an illusion, then everything is one will. You know, because it's like the reality was ignited into being. It was simulated as if you turned on the light in the room and existence happened. So Sandro says, it's all I want to know. I am ego and God in one thing. Let me tell you this video I saw on YouTube where it was this debate and there was this commentator, this like host, and there was this host and there was this, what do you call it? I would say this, guys, that in that video there was this, I don't know, this guy who was like a scientist who had a PhD in physics, but the guy was like this Indian guru simultaneously. And then there was this other guy who was the host, and there was this much more secular-minded person. I think just another physicist or something. And so the religious guy would suddenly been this scientist who had suddenly become a guru. This scientist who had become this guru had this situation where it was like uh, the host asks this guru, "What is God?" or something, just like how you're asking Sandro. And he says, the host says something like, "What is God when we are an ego?" The guru looks at the host, ignoring the guy he's debating with, as if he was trying to enlighten the host, and he says, "Your ego is God, because there is an unknown movement."
And that unknown movement, anytime it moves beyond the narrative of an empirical analysis, it has to be put into some context. Like, we got to talk about it somehow, so some people use the word God. Some scientists who people didn't, I think, respect, uh, other scientists didn't respect as much, but he came with the concept of the unified field theory or something. So this constant idea that as we go, and so it wasn't as easy as just breaking an atom. It's like as we were breaking the atom, we became aware of the observer effect. And what does that mean? As we're breaking subatomic particles, we became aware of the observer effect. That means we realize physical reality is much more mysterious, because in our attempt and speed and attention to how we go about conducting the experiment, the result of the experiment can be there. It's kind of wondering, do we see the pattern in the experiment because the pattern is our eyes? Like, are we limited to our sight, or is the world limited regardless of what amount of sight you have? So there's mysteries here, and this mystery has to return. It's like, guys, it took us 4 billion years to evolve to be able to communicate and speak. And so people shouldn't fear language. Language is just a technology being used, you know? So in some sense, we're invisible programmers. When we speak or communicate, we're revealing the code of each other's inner realms to kind of see what the outer realm is. You see, after some point, the, uh, if you're obsessed with yourself, there is a dissension in both theological morality and also different contexts of morality, more disciplined sense, that reality, if you are obsessed with your idea of yourself, you will descend into a perversion of your reality. And when I say perversion, I mean something that is being reduced to just like food. Do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to keep the evolutionary biology relevant here, but it's like every day the mind awakens to roar into the world and then return back into the void. This endless waking up, sleep, conscious, unconscious, conscious, unconscious. And after some point you realize, if you want to define the unconscious based on what you consciously know, it will always be limited. So the concept that religion had this mentality, because many people don't know this, monotheistic and Judaic Abrahamic religions, their mentality is you are submitting your ego to the will that is moving the whole universe. Now, where does this take us, and what value does it have? Personal lives, in people's personal lives, like in the inner realms, like when a person is alone, you should have experience of freedom that is a freedom that is closest to your ultimate freedom. That means when there isn't other people around, I am my mind. My mind is valid in my domain of attention. But when others emerge, or when you suddenly see different philosophers in the world, they shared their contributions of how far they could see into what this reality was. So, anyways, guys, keep the questions coming. I don't know if it's been 20 minutes. I don't even remember what time I started this. Okay, let's go 10 more minutes.
So guys, it could be any question. It could be question about, let me tell you, you can ask me three kinds of questions. Let's say questions about the past, questions about now, and questions about the future. Let's open these three questions, okay? Alright guys, here's the thing. Just to make it more easier, it is the case that the more options a person provides, the, the slower the system's decision making can become, because it has to process all the options. So I'm going to make it easier. Anybody who has a question about the future, feel free to ask. And ask the question as if you want everybody in the chat section to also answer. Guys, I'm going to share with you a hilarious story of my childhood. This is a very personal story I'm going to share. Um, so I was born in Iran, Tehran, and at the age of 7, my family immigrated to Vancouver, Canada. And so this story I'm going to tell you is from my first day at experiencing grade 1, and I only knew 3 English words. I knew yes, no, and my name. Okay? And so I remember I go to this school, and I'm just like this kind of like, you know, I don't have that many vivid memories, but I just remember this one memory where there was this teacher, and I don't know, whoever was the manager of that school was like definitely didn't do their job well. Do you know what I mean? Like, like this teacher was way too angry in front of first graders, Like when looking back at it, that was like messed up how angry that lady was. But anyways, this lady, I'm sitting at this. Every kid had their own table. I'm sitting at a table. She comes up to me, and all I see is this lady shouting. Like I don't know English then. And she asked me something where I can tell it's a question. She said something like, um, "I'll tell you later on in the memory. I was remembering that like sometimes I can sit down and exactly zoom in on memories and reestablish their accuracy." Um, and anyways, she is at the time I didn't have it in my conscious memory. But years later, when I learned English, everything I'd heard in English suddenly became conscious. You I'm just saying that she came up to me and she said something like, uh, she said, "Do you want to go to the principal's office?" And all I knew was yes and no. And I was like, imagine like a 7-year-old me, you know, a 7-year-old me, and this teacher's like, "Do you want to go to the principal's office?" And I'm like, yes. And then I could totally see the expression on her face being like, "What the?" And then she says something else, and I just say no. And all that I was doing was saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I was literally only using the only 2 words in my arsenal, in that situation. And it was like years later, I remember, like it was, I don't know. Sometimes I've looked at my own life and I've laughed a lot. I feel I've always been like some stumbling fool with some glare of hope. you know? Oh man. But that was funny, I was that teacher was messed up though, too much anger. Anger is really the sign of a beast. Why? Because the beast can't exert a free will beyond their instincts. This is the issue of the whole dissension of the person's psychology through all the various avenues of life we see in regards to, for example, chemical addictions that people have in society. So, anyways, guys, I think there's no more questions. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode has been helpful. Just to say one last thing before I end off. Experiential journey. Yeah, that's pretty much life. I mean, existence is something that was happening and you opened your eyes in it, right? And if you identify with the body, well, think of it this way, that everything in life changes. That means I'm like, how can I remember I had this vision of my own future self like dead. I saw myself like on like no longer existing. In my dreams, I've kind of seen myself die a couple times, but like I saw myself not existing, right? And I envisioned my future, the future, and after I reached the point where it was like Frodo reached the Shire, I couldn't see my own existence any further in my own vision of my future. So I in that moment there was this how do I say it? It's as if I wondered, how is it that in the future I don't exist, and I got sad. I just got a sad feeling of sadness, of seeing my own and visualizing my own non-existence in the future. But then I wondered why I wasn't sad that I don't have the same physical body as I did 10 years ago. Why am I not sad that everything, including the cells and the ideology and the experience of the being, has changed? So, as far as we are experientially speaking about life, the purpose of life is change in motion. It's just dynamic, it's just a grand happening. So, we can be conscious experiencers and we can pilot through unconscious existence. And so may these talks be a calling to all pilots of consciousness in history navigate as your plane of existence. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in.
Blessings. And there's this one quote I'm going to say. There's this quote that says, when the child is born, like the newborn child cries, and the world laughs, the parents, the family, the civilization is all smart, smiling at a child being born, and new pattern is entering this system. Now, the quote says, when the child is born, the child cries, the world laughs, gracefully laughs, celebrates, and the child cries. The child doesn't know, is unconscious, and cries. Okay? Now, the second part of the quote is when the child dies, when the human being completes the cycle of existence, when the child dies, the world cries, and the child laughs, and the world cries, something like that. What does that mean? That means you are never the same when every experience is a shift of the evaluation of the whole thing. We must immediately establish the freedom of our inner realms and build an advanced civilization while we're alive. That means encourage advanced communication. It is the greatest strategy against extinction. The advancement of the minds of human beings. We're not just objects hovering in the middle of nowhere. We can build something here. That's the value of life. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Blessings.